Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mice, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
Hello, everybody.
Ruben Bressler.
Hi, what's up?
Well, it's Thanksgiving this week.
It is.
And I'm very thankful for you guys.
Oh, thank you. It's funny.
So
I was just about to ask you if we were recording next week because normally you go on your pilgrimage with the kinfolk,
Right.
but that's not happening.
Nope.
So I guess we're still recording Wednesday night.
We are definitely recording Wednesday night.
Okay.
So
Excellent.
You know, it
So
sucks, but
this is it's been an alternative sort of year. You know, we're recording this on an alternative day than we usually do as
And
well.
you're using an
So
alternative microphone.
I'm using an alternative microphone because
Yes.
my cord broke itself, and
Yeah.
so it's all sort of alt today.
All alternative all the time.
I love alternative music, right? I'm good with that.
I love alternative. Hey, shout out to CD 101 in Columbus, Ohio, who lost their broadcasting license like 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
For 102.5. They said they were going to go online exclusively, and then a bunch of angel investors came together and brought it back.
Oh, wow.
So now they're 102, or they're like 92.5 in Columbus, Ohio. They're one of the last privately owned alternative stations in the United States, and I grew up listening to them. So
Wow.
shout out to them.
Well, that's quite a happy ending.
Tell you what. Well, let me tell you, we also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 Commander Legends cards. Ruben?
Well, this week's winner not only had a great comment, but has a great username that I think can only be encapsulated by Gopher from the Winnie the Pooh cartoons. This week's winner is Soft Serve Sultan.
Yeah.
Who writes, "Is Blim comedic genius a joke to you?"
I mean, the comedian didn't include it on his
Yeah,
list. So
at this point, I can
That's
only
very
apologize
true.
to the Blim comedic genius.
I know, right? To the Blum
I
community.
love that card. I would like to incorporate it into my Rakdos deck somehow because I have a Rakdos the Showstopper deck, which is very much like, are you not entertained? And there is a bit of an element to chaos to it. I'm just thinking like, I'm wondering if I maybe have to like tweak it a little bit so that I have some things worth giving away, because otherwise I'm going, I don't want to give away like
Right.
like a soul ring I'm not using anymore. Like, I don't know, but I'd really like to find room for like a demonic pact or something silly if I
Right.
can.
For
Hunted horror.
For those
Yeah.
who don't know, Blim Comedic Genius is a red, a black, and 2 generic mana. It's a 4/3 rare legendary imp from Commander Legends. It has flying, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player gains control of target permanent you control. Then each player loses life and discards cards equal to the number of permanents they control but don't own.
So you can get, I think Hunted Horror is good in that one, right? You give them the 2 Centaur tokens.
And there's the
then...
new blue spell that lets you just give somebody a creature. It's like, here.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, wrong turn.
Yeah, you take it. I want it. It's cool.
Yeah, there's some good stuff.
Yeah, so thanks for being a part of the show, Soft Serve Sultan. Please contact Erin before she blocks you on all social media. 34,000 strong.
Yeah, after this weekend, I might be at 35.
Ooh.
Nice.
We aim high here. We aim high.
Yeah.
So let's see here. Thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway, and stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. Because this week we are talking about alternate costs.
Mm-hmm.
Generally defined as rather, let's see, what was the words? Rather than pay, I think was the
Rather
ones that found.
than, instead of,
Yes.
you know.
Which I'm a huge fan of, because I
yeah.
don't play decks that like run lands or like,
Right,
you want me to
exactly.
play in
Fair.
this economy? Right, you want me to pay?
Yeah.
It's funny.
You're
I was
paying
doing
retail? Come on.
It's funny, as I was doing my unboxing stream with my boyfriend last night, which you can check out on my Twitch channel. We had a lot of fun with it. And one of the cards we opened was like a Valakut Invoker or something. And he was like, you can pay 8 colorless mana to like lightning bolt something. And I was like, absolutely not.
Yeah,
I was like, I
no.
barely want to pay 1 mana to lightning bolt something. Are you
Yeah.
serious?
8 is a really high number. Why would I? What kind of person?
And it turns out
sir.
that alternate cost cards are generally very, very good. Because
Yeah.
I
A couple
have
of them
way
are
more than
banned
10.
or restricted. Yeah.
Oh, a lot of them are banned and
Yeah,
restricted. It
and
turns
they-
out that when the entire system of the game is based on the mana and the cost and benefit of paying for things like exchanging goods for services, and then you break that system, turns out those are good. Turns out it's good.
You would think, but yet Wizards still keeps them coming. And I mean, they
still
haven't
sometimes do
made
it.
as many of them, but the ones that do come out,
Well,
Yeah.
you know
We'll
why
talk
they
about that
keep
on the show.
doing that, right?
Yeah, to sell packs.
Because Hasbro is
That's true.
Oh,
Watches
I
a
love
subsidiary
me.
of Hasbro Incorporated.
I
need to
love
put
me
that
an
on a
alternate
t-shirt.
cost.
Like if we ever do Magic Mike's merch, we need a t-shirt that says Hasbro is a subsidiary.
Wizard of the Coast is a subsidiary of
Wizards
Hasbro.
of the Coast is a subsidiary of Hasbro.
Yes,
Yeah.
and their shareholders. All right.
Yes.
Let's move here to number 10. I don't have one. It's higher on someone else's list. Ruben, you got a number 10?
I do, and it's one of the cards that I think that we can all agree. I think we've all cast this card, at least in a cube. Aaron may have cast the most copies of this card.
Because I don't cube, so.
Right. But Evan and I both can appreciate the history of this card as well, as it won a Pro Tour and then won Worlds the very next year as a part of Necro Control in 1996 in the hands of Paul McCabe, and then in Black 5 in the hands of Jakob Slemmer at Worlds 1997. My number 10 is Contagion.
Ooh.
Yeah, big fan.
Fun.
Contagion is 3 colorless black for an instant from Alliances. You may pay 1 life and exile a black card from your hand rather than pay this spell's mana cost. Distribute 2 -2/-1 counters among 2 target creatures. Very good for dealing with early mana elves. It can take out a hate bear in a pinch if you need it to. Iconic art with that creepy kitty and the skeletons in the background. It's been in a couple of Masters editions and stuff like that. Just an excellent card.
Yeah, in Vintage, we alternate between this and Sickening Shoal, which may or may not be on someone else's list as well. But, this is good for those Deathrite Shamans. If you suspect a Containment Priest, an Arcanist, it's actually, Arcanist is too big for this now.
Yeah.
What's with Wizards giving creatures 3 toughness? Stop that.
I can't, yeah.
But you can get things with those, or you can shrink something at least, so it's a lot more manageable to deal with.
Right.
But it's a card I've definitely used quite a bit of in my day.
Oh, yeah. I think this is the only place where -2/-1 counters show up.
I'm pretty sure there are others.
Are there a few others that are out there? Because that's
I think like Frankenstein's Monster. Let me look.
something weird. Those were weird counters they used back in the day.
Yeah.
And Wizards would actually try to give you counters in various ways. Like there were punch-out counters you could get with like magazines and stuff. All sorts of ways to kind of make this, I guess, seem more appealing. Because like at the time, there'd never been, when Alliances first came out, there'd never been alternate costs like that. Yep. And so they sort of wanted to make them exciting and interesting. But then the other half of it was there was the card disadvantage theory that said, you can't run Contagion. You're going to lose. You're going to lose that on cards. And it's like, but if I kill their
Turns out if you have Necropotence in your deck, that doesn't matter. You are absolutely right, by the way. This is the only card that has -2/-1 counters.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's really strange. And so it's 38 cents. It's fine. They can reprint it if they want, but no one's asking for it, so we probably won't see it.
Sure.
All right. Aaron, what's number 10?
So my number 10 doesn't specifically have an alternate cost. You do need to pay full price for it, but once it sticks, you are paying an alternate cost for things afterwards. So this is a very flavorful card, has only been printed once, and is very important in Grimgrin EDH. My number 10 is Rooftop Storm.
Nice.
So Rooftop Storm is 5 colorless and a blue. It was originally printed in Innistrad. It is an enchantment, and it says you may pay 0 colorless rather than pay the mana cost for zombie creature spells you cast. And so if you have this out, Gravecrawler and Grimgrin, you can just sort of keep feeding things to Grimgrin and making him really, really big. Or if you have any sort of draining effects, you can also drain people that way. And it's just so flavorful. We've all seen that horror trope of the mad scientist and the lightning and being outside. And it's alive. Yeah. This just perfectly embodies that. And it's only been printed once, so it's about $2 or $3. But this just will take your Grimgrin deck or any zombie deck in just a whole other direction.
Yeah, we're great with Gisa and Drolf. We're great with the Scarab God. All sorts of really cool ways of. There are 4,006 decks in EDH Rec that have Rooftop Storm in them.
Yeah, well, it is sort of the combo enabler for a lot of different archetypes.
I remember when I first built my Grimgrin deck, I was talking a really big game. I was like, I'm not going to use this. I'm going to challenge myself. And then when I did put it in there, it was like when you're watching Fast and the Furious and they hit the nitrous button and you're just like.
Yep. That's a good.
Very hard to go back. Yeah.
It's a nitrous canister for your zombie deck.
Yeah, when Thraxamundar is suddenly free.
That's a problem.
That's a thing and a stuff.
It's fine.
That's awesome. All right, let's move on here to number 9. Ruben, what's number 9?
My number 9 is, I'm glad that Aaron broke the seal on cards that cost retail that later have an alternate cost to do something with them.
Okay.
So that my number 9 doesn't look so ridiculous by comparison. Now, I'm still probably going to get, oh, this is your Leviathan, this is your Doubling Season, this is your, you idiot, why is this card on your list? But it does have the key phrase of instead of. My number 9, get ready for it, is Heart of Kiran. Heart of Kiran is 2 colorless mana for a legendary artifact vehicle with flying, vigilance, and crew of 3. Tap any number of creatures you control with total power of 3 or more. This vehicle becomes an artifact creature until end of turn, but you may remove a loyalty counter from a planeswalker you control rather than pay Heart of Kiran's crew cost. This was a huge part of, perhaps the main part, of the Mardu vehicles deck after Smuggler's Copter went the way of the Dodo. It was very good alongside, for example, Chandra, Torch of Defiance, being a vehicle that not only had vigilance, but could also be crewed on the offense and on the defense. It was an extremely powerful card, and I think qualifies.
I'm totally on board with this one. I'm fine with Heart of Kiran being part of this.
Yeah.
Nice.
I remember reading this when it first came out and thinking I'd never seen anything like it before.
Yes,
absolutely. It was weird. Yeah, it was totally strange. Well, I mean, vehicles were strange, right? And how good vehicles were and how bad they were. The ones they pushed, the ones that didn't. Smuggler's Copter, well, obviously was way, way too good. And then Aether Revolt comes out. We're like, oh god, don't be another, Smuggler's Copter. But it just turned out to be very, very good.
This, of course, did win Worlds in 2018 in the hands of Javier Dominguez in that Rakdos aggro deck. Big loyalty planeswalkers like Karn, Scion of Urza, Chandra helping power this thing out. It was a powerhouse in Standard.
Yeah, it was easy to sort of build on it's not a creature, so I can Wrath of God type stuff, and then now it's a creature and I can smash you with it. I'm all tapped out, but I can still make it a creature. I can make it a creature on your turn by removing that loyalty counter. Like, a lot of really good play in there. This was definitely on my short list. But that said, Aaron, what's number 9?
My number 9 is partially responsible for the rise of Oops All Spells in Modern. This is a card I'd never considered before, and it is part of a very convoluted chain that can help you win the game in the Oops deck. My number 9 is Salvage Titan.
Sure.
So Salvage Titan is 4 colorless and 2 black. It was originally printed in Shards of Alara. Artifact creature golem, 6 power, 4 toughness. You can sacrifice 3 artifacts rather than pay the spell's mana cost, and you can also exile 3 artifact cards from your graveyard to return Salvage Titan from your graveyard to your hand. So you may be asking yourself, Aaron, what does this do? How does this matter? I will tell you. So, once you've cast either your Undercity Informer or your Balustrade Spy, you're going to target yourself. You're going to mill your whole library because the only lands you're using are the new double-face lands from Zendikar Rising. This will trigger all of your Creeping Chills and your Narcomoebas. Your 1/1s entering the battlefield will trigger 3 copies of Sword of the Meek. Yep. You're then going to exile 3 artifacts from your graveyard to put Salvage Titan in your hand. You will sacrifice 3 artifacts, which will most likely be the swords, to cast Salvage Titan. That will be the second creature you cast this turn, so that brings your Vengevines back. And if you have the combo pieces in hand, you can then discard things to Phantasmagorian. And then you have a Nexus of Fate, which will prevent you from decking yourself so that you can attack and win the game. So, just who would have thought that this card, I've seen this card certainly in some bulk boxes in my day, but this card is quite important and is seeing a bit of modern play right now.
Wow, I didn't know exactly how that combo worked. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Goodness.
It is a heck of a combo. It's a little bit convoluted, but turns out when you turn your entire library face up, there are now enough cards in Magic that allow you to put 1 Salvage Titan, 1 Phantasmagorian, 1 Nexus of Fate to prevent you from decking yourself, and the requisite number of Narcomoebas and Swords of the Meek to get out, a playset of Vengevines and Creeping Chills.
I love it.
That's amazing. For my number 9 here, and I'm sure this isn't the last card, and I know this isn't the last card we're going to talk about from Mercadian Masks, but Wizards came back to alternate costs as a big part of Mercadian Masks and Mercadian Masks block. That block was trash. It was terrible. It was some of the worst Magic ever made. Like, seriously.
It was also very convoluted and disconnected because while it was a 3-set block, the 3 sets took place on 3 different planes.
But it's also my understanding that that set was very necessary, that we had just come off of like a particularly broken season
we had just
or
come
string
out
of
of
sets, and that
Urza's,
we needed a very, vanilla, almost painful set to like realign.
Reset. Yeah.
There's definitely sort of a lineage of Magic where you had spells were way too good and way too important, and then they moved into the era of everything sucked because we can't make good spells anymore. So don't make the creatures good, make everything suck. And then there was, how about we make spells really good again? And then that happened for a while, and then eventually they said, wait a minute, the spells need to suck and the creatures need to be great. Whatever. The point is, this is a card that's in a ton of cubes. It's almost like $12 because Wizards should be reprinting this thing already. It's not on any reserved lists, but it's still a hell of a Magic card. Plenty of picks in the cube of mine have included Unmask.
Yeah.
Unmask
for sure.
is a black and 3 generic mana for a rare sorcerer that says you may exile a black card from your hand rather than pay its mana cost. Target player reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. Until Thoughtseize, this was the best discard spell in Magic.
Yep. I've certainly cast this in Dredge. This is a great disruptive tool. Gives you something to do. We are running Creeping Chill right now, and sometimes you have a Creeping Chill in your hand that you have nothing to do with. And so those are really great to pitch to an Unmask. I do believe you can also target yourself.
Yeah, look at target player's hand.
So the Legacy Reanimator decks have run it as well. It's just a way of going whoop and then getting yourself one step closer to bringing back a Griselbrand.
Yeah, being able to no mana make them get rid of their best card, or no mana get rid of your Reanimator target where you want it to go.
Right.
That's
and this also features a huge plot point in the Mercadian Masks story. Which the Mercadian Masks novel, by the way, was like the first Magic novel I'd read as a small child, and is a great story. Like the world of Mercadia was Ravnica before Ravnica. It was so unique and so different. It was like one of the first times that Magic was like, let's go someplace completely weird and different. And it was featuring the Weatherlight crew and a new character named Takara. And this scene is when Volrath unveils that Volrath, who is a shapeshifter, becomes Takara and sort of like was usurping the Weatherlight crew on their journey of what they were working on at the time.
Yeah, Mercadian Masks, like as a block, it's like Homelands, Terrible set. Fantastic world building.
Grotha is like the coolest story. Homelands' story was spectacular. The cards were garbage.
They were so
but
bad.
the world building redeems it so much, and Mercadian Masks the same way. I would love to go back to Mercadia. It's such a flavorful, interesting world with the city of Mercadia atop an upside-down mountain. Goblins there are like the chief powerful race, which is why Squee became the Goblin Nabob. It's such a cool place.
Yeah, the whole world's a market or whatever, essentially, right?
Yep.
So
basically, yeah.
Moving to number 8. Ruben, what's number 8?
I have excellent news. My number 8, my number 7, my number 6, and my number 5 are all higher on somebody else's list.
We will see you on the other end of the show.
I will take a nap is what's going to happen. I think that 4 in a row is the highest I've ever had.
That's a lot. Aaron, you got a number 8?
I do. My number 8 is a card that to me feels like it came out of nowhere. I had never heard of this card before until I think it was either Shadows over Innistrad or Eldritch Moon came out. And then this card started gaining a lot more attention as a really neat way to get yourself a Griselbrand. If you don't feel like reanimating it, or if you don't want to cast Show and Tell, this will also get you there. And was really, one of the first decks that I know of at least to use this card, which has then evolved, no pun intended, into Neo form, the Neo brand decks as well. My number 8 is Allosaurus Rider.
Yeah.
So Allosaurus Rider was originally printed in Cold Snap. It's 5 colorless and 2 green, but you're probably not paying for this. It is a elf warrior with a very unique power and toughness of 1+*, and then 1+* for power and toughness. You may remove 2 green cards in your hand from the game rather than pay the mana cost. Its power and toughness is equal to 1 plus the number of lands you control. So you find a way to cheat this out. You sacrifice it to Eldritch Evolution, which allows you to search your library for a card with converted mana cost X or less, where X is 2 plus the sacrifice creature's mana cost. So what do you get that costs 9 or less? You get Griselbrand.
Right.
And then you win the game that way. Now we have Neoform, which allows you to get something with X+1. So because Allosaurus Rider is 7, 7 + 1 is 8, which is Grizzlebrand CMC. And so, a very glass cannon kind of combo deck, but, has seen, some play in Modern and has even done well in events here and there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a legitimate threat. It's a glass cannon, right? It's one of those decks that if you're just not prepared for it and it's the right day, and no one else is out on the radar, no sideboard cards for it, you're screwed.
Yeah.
This was part of a cycle from Cold Snap, one of the most beleaguered and
terrible.
I'll say unloved
terrible.
Magic terrible sets.
I think we were just talking about that at the pre-show.
We were.
It's trash.
And I don't know if any of the others will appear later on the list.
Okay.
But the entire cycle has seen some amount of play. I mean, for example, I have Fury of the Horde in my Itali EDH deck. I've played many copies of Commandeer out of the sideboard of Fairies.
Sure.
Because stealing your opponent's Bitter Blossom with a Commandeer on the draw is hilarious.
Goodness.
There was some amount of Soul Spike combo with Grizzlebrand, where you just draw your whole deck and then gain
Soul
4
Spike
life and deal 4, and then do the same thing. And then I think Sunscour has seen play somewhere, maybe. But yeah, I mean, look, you're 3-for-1ing yourself. It's not even a 2-for-1 at this point, like Contagion. You're 3-for-1ing yourself. So these really lend themselves to broken combo decks.
Let me tell you.
And Allosaurus Rider is the top of the heap these days.
I've been to funerals that were more upbeat than the pre-release for Cold Snap.
It's not good.
It's pretty miserable.
It was dark. It was sad.
You used to be able to get a box of Cold Snap for like $30. Now you'll be hard pressed to find a Dark Depths for $30.
Sure.
Not to mention Mishra's Bauble, which I think is in Cold Snap.
Yeah, I mean, and they gave the Dark Depths promo to everybody, which later was up to like $50 at one point, But man, I tell you, at the time, it was just, what is this sadness?
It was not good.
And
it was not good.
We hate it. All right. My number 8 here is this is a classic. Like, this is the old school. Once again, we return to Mercadian Mask because they did a lot of this stuff. But this card still sees play. It's kind of crazy to me. This thing has only been printed one time. It is as powerful and as cool and as interesting as it is. But it's only been printed one time. It is a common, right? But for a common to have the power of land grant, for you to have no cards that are lands in your hand. So it encourages you to play way less mana, if you don't want to, obviously. Because Belcher wants to play their one mountain or whatever. Land Grant is a green and a generic mana for a common sorcery from Mercadian Masks. It says if you have no land cards in hand, you may reveal your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Search your library for a forest card, reveal that card, and put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. And of course, you can go get a Taiga because it just says forest card if you like.
Yep. I've also used this in a No Land Spy, which is another, really weird glass cannon broken combo deck in Pauper. If I remember correctly, it's,
I mean, the foil's $13.
I think it's still Balustrade Spy. Spy. Flip over your whole deck, and then you get like, it goes Anarchist. Like somehow you bring back an Anarchist, and then it's like Sickening Dreams or... it's a lot, but yeah, typical same thing, combo deck.
All right, yeah. So this card in and of itself is just one of those cards. It's like, man, I don't see you doing a lot of fair things with Land Grant.
You used to. When this card was in Standard, it was a big part of Super Grow, which was the very first Brainstorm decks. Before fetch lands, before any of that kind of stuff, you wanted a free shuffle effect, and you wanted to play very few lands, and you wanted to play lots of spells to be able to pump your Quirion Dryads and do whatever. And this was like the first of those kind of decks. This also was a big part of 3 Deuce, which was a popular old extended deck at the height of Tricks, at the height of the most broken combo deck of all time. The 3 Deuce was a deck that had like River Boas and Mog Fanatics, and was just like a red-green aggro deck, and it was called 3 Deuce because your Dwarven Miners would get a Rancor on them and become 3/2s.
Mm-hmm.
That was the reason why the deck was called 3 Deuce.
Yeah.
And it was not, but it like fit perfectly in the metagame. You had Elvish Lyrist, you had Sky Shroud Elite to take advantage of your opponent's broken stuff, and you just sort of barely outraced people.
Like, Dwarven Miner, for those who don't know, is a ridiculously overpowered card these days.
Oh my god.
This card would literally run standard if it existed
for sure.
right now. It's a red and a generic mana for a 1/2. It's an uncommon that says for a red and 2 generic mana, tap : destroy target non-basic land. That would be insane these days.
Would
Absolutely.
ruin standard, yeah.
Yeah. Standard would be just Dwarven Miner decks and people that hate the stupid card.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's move on here to number 7, where Ruben and I are higher. Aaron, you got one?
Count me in. My 7 is also higher.
Oh,
I have some
totally missed
alternating.
the
So my 7, my 5, and my 3 are higher.
Oh, well, goodness. My 7, my 5, and that's it, because my last higher was number 10. Oh, well, we missed a number 7, so we get to do number 6 instead. Ruben doesn't have one, as we know. Yep. But Aaron, what you got?
My number 6 is a card that I could spot a mile away. Like, the minute this card was previewed, I was like, oh, this is broken in half. I cannot wait to see what people do with it. And it has now become a staple in Vintage. You're probably only running one copy because that's all you really need, but Paradoxical Outcome was very quick to adopt this. Storm, DPS, uses this as well. And it's just a hilarious card. I played with it a little bit in Standard in like a Golgari Explorer deck, and I did some hilarious things with it. It's just so much fun. I actually have a clip of the first time I ever cast this. And it's just a very unique feeling because I get chills just thinking about it. My number 6 is BOLAS'S Citadel.
This was my number 7, so I'm right there.
BOLAS'S Citadel is 3 colorless and 3 black. It was originally printed in War of the Spark. Legendary artifact. You can look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. And then you can tap and sacrifice 10 non-land permanents. Each opponent loses 10 life. So tinker.
Yeah, exactly.
I have seen this on turn 1. Turn 2, you pair this with Sensei's Divining Top. It's basically game over because you can filter away any lands that might be holding you back, or things that you don't want. I mean, this is just hilarious. It's also a win condition. So like, once you get to a point, you can sacrifice all of those crappy explorer creatures, or you can sacrifice the Moxen you don't need anymore. Right. Or if you find yourself in like a board stall situation, you can sacrifice your Monastery Mentor tokens. And so, this is just a ridiculous card. And it just makes me so happy. Like, I just remember playing with it and it just, oh my goodness.
Yeah. This card effectively replaced Yogg Bargain.
Yep, because Bargain got restricted a short time before this. And so people were starting to run that. But when you're good enough to replace Bargain, like, Jesus.
It's crazy. I mean, so this was very good, of course, with Wild Growth Walker and the Explore package because you could gain the life back, play, and just sort of keep cycling through your deck, explore the top of your library, and set yourself up. But you don't even need to gain life, really.
Yes, you do.
I mean, you don't really have
to. Well, no, you can just win the game.
I mean, but that's how you would do it. Is like, I don't know who thought the Wild Growth Walker thing interaction
in Standard.
Was okay.
In Standard.
It was awful.
Later on, this was as a 1 and 2 of in like Esper Hero.
Yeah.
Because you would be like trading your tokens and like
Magic,
just having fun. You'd be at like 15, your opponent would be like at 15, and you'd be like, all right, here's a Citadel, and now you're dead. And you didn't even need to gain life. You didn't need to do anything particularly special to play. Like, you could be hellbent, totally out of the game, and find a Citadel on top, tap out, and win the game. Like, it's like one of the very few cards that can just win a game entirely by itself.
Because it is its own, like, it's its own engine. The stuff that you're paying your life for, aka no mana for, you're just going to sack and get rid of anyway. The Wild Growth Walker interaction, for those who don't know, it's a 2 mana 1/3 that whenever a creature you control explores, you put a +1/+1 counter on it and gain 3 life. So if you pay 2 life for an explore creature, you gained a life, and that thing got bigger, and you just and you got that card off top of your deck. It was ridiculous. I don't know why they thought that interaction was the key thing in Standard, but I assure you, it was the key thing in Standard, and I just did not like it after a while.
And now it's in Historic, in the mostly in the Jund Sacrifice decks, alongside Mayhem Devil and Gilded Goose and all those classics from Standard. Also joining things like Phyrexian Tower and the other historic things, and this is like a big way to just end the game.
Yeah, War of the Spark was definitely, like, we began our power creep kind of like incline got a lot steeper with War of the Spark. All of these cards, a ton of Planeswalkers, and these cards that, just like this one, did not need that last ability. But because it has that last ability, it makes it absolutely amazing.
Right.
Versus just being like a weird thing you might play around with sometimes. So yeah, that's just what they got. My number 6 here is definitely a Cube classic. This is one of my favorite Magic cards, like from just back in the day. Like, you know, no matter how good a creature generally is, depending on the hexproofs and the shrouds of the world, but whatever, if a creature can just die from a Doomblade effect, if you can just control a swamp, pay 4 life, and snuff them out. Just snuff it out. Just
Snuff
get
out.
out of here.
So good.
Snuff Out is a black and 3 generic mana for a common instant that says if you control a swamp, you may pay 4 life rather than pay the spell's mana cost. Destroy target non-black creature, it can't be regenerated. So this is very hard to reprint, even though they got it squeezed in through Garrick versus Liliana. But it's also just a damn fine removal spell when you just want to get rid of something for 4 life.
This has started seeing play again with the rise of Legacy Death Shadow, because you're perfectly fine paying the 4 life because it just gets you where you need to be. And so, you know, for me, you talked about the reprint. The Steve Argyle art will just always be it for me. Just that great shot of Liliana and like the skull and the fumes and the candles. Just mwah.
It's very
Yeah, this was one of the main removal spells in both Ava Green and Team America, which are sort of so Ava Green was a black-based black-green deck, and then Team America was more of a 3-color Sultai before Sultai. Both of them are Tombstalker decks, effectively, that wanted to fill up their graveyards as quickly as possible to be able to power out big things. Snuff Out being a free spell, being able to take care of opposing Tarmogoyfs was a huge deal. And this is just like one of the best limited removal spells of the format as well. Card is just great.
Yeah, card is super sweet, and it's like $5 for the awesome Steve Argyle artwork because, again, it's really difficult to reprint because it has that R word on it of regenerated.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on here. None of us have a number 5. We skipped number 7 and number 5.
5 is not alive in this show.
I'm pretty sure that's a first. I know
we've skipped 2 numbers together.
Right, we've skipped 2.
Yeah.
I know we've skipped 1. I believe we've never skipped 2. But that brings us to number 4. Ruben, you're back in action. What's number 4?
I am. I'm back in action, and it's time to. This is basically Mercadian Masks, the
Top
list.
10, yeah.
Y'all know that my favorite things to talk about are if you win a Pro Tour, you have a chance of getting on my list, like Contagion and Heart of Kirin. If you're in the Cube, right? If you're powerful enough to be in the Vintage Cube, you got a good shot of being on my list, like BOLAS'S Citadel. But I'll tell you what, if you get banned in any format, you are like high on my radar to get put on my list. And this card certainly has been banned in one of the weirder formats that we talk about, but it takes something special to get banned in any format, even Pauper. And Invigorate is something special.
Oh, yes.
Invigorate is, of course, a common from Mercadian Masks. Later became an uncommon as it was reprinted in Double Masters and Masters 25 and all those places. 2 colorless and a green gets you an instant that gets target creature +4/+4 until end of turn. But I'm not sure I've ever paid retail for an Invigorate. If you control a forest, rather than pay this spell's mana cost, you may have an opponent gain 3 life. Now, usually that's, you would think, oh, they gain 3 life, but then my creature gets +4/+4. That's at the cost of a card. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Oh, but what if life totals don't matter? What if we're pumping an infect creature, such as Glistener Elf or Blighted Agent? Well, that's exactly what we're doing. We're making our 1/1s 5/5s and going to town.
This was my number 5, so I was right behind you. This card, to me, deserves to be in the top 5 because, like, the impact this had when Infect showed up, like, it didn't take long for people to go, wait. Is this on the 1-drop? That is a thing? And it would be like Invigorate, kill you out of nowhere. And that's just a thing that can happen in Magic these days.
I remember when I first started playing Legacy, I knew that there was an infect deck, but when you're playing Cabal Therapy, you have to learn the format because you have to know what cards you care about. And so when you're playing Modern, this is not Modern legal. So, if this were Modern, you'd care about like maybe mutagenic growth, or you'd care about Might of Volcrosa, but most of the time, if I'm playing Infect and I Cabal Therapy you, I'm probably going for Invigorate because you do have to pay for everything else just about, and we'll get there, but just a free and effectively free thing like this, like that's got to go. Like,
yeah, it gets it for free. Like it's just the totally different axis, of the Infect player. They just don't care. Like whatever. Totally. That's just another number. That's all that is. Aaron, what's number 4?
My number 4 is a card that I was really excited about when it first came out, but it ended up having seismic implications for the Vintage format in particular. Some people say that Golgari Grave Troll kind of died for this card's sins, and Workshops became a much more manageable deck thanks to this card. My number 4 is Force of Vigor. So Force of Vigor is 2 colorless and 2 green. It was originally printed in Modern Horizons. It's an instant. If it's not your turn, you can exile a green card from your hand rather than pay this card's mana cost, and you can destroy up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments.
Crazy.
So Shops had been, some would say even an oppressive deck in Vintage for a really, really long time. And then this card came out and Shops became much more reasonable. It still has moments of greatness, but it's not nearly as powerful as it once was. Grave Troll had to be restricted in Vintage because you can't give Vintage Dredge, Golgari Grave Troll, and Force of Vigor. Like, they have to work a little harder to make sure they have enough green cards to use this thing. There are some fair decks that, will pay for it, or, maybe they don't have enough green cards to support it, but it does see play across, every format it's legal in and whatever capacity. But, when I just think of Vintage, you can just see the impact on the metagame that this card had. Even the graveyard hate that people played, before you would just sort of slam Leyline and laugh at people, but now it's like, well, we need to start using Ravenous Trap now, or we need to start using Containment Priest now, or, people even falling on Surgical Extraction just because no Dredge player is going to leave the house without 4 forces. So people had to change the way they play based on this card.
And that's exactly what they wanted Modern Horizons to do, is to shake up formats. And
Lavinia. One of the reasons Lavinia is so good is because if Lavinia is out, this card doesn't do anything. Shops really needs that sphere effect because this card costing 1 more. If the thing is just seeing the decks go next level, where it's like, okay, if you're going to play this, then how is Shops going to respond? How is Outcome going to respond? Just really seismic changes.
Oh yeah, this thing just changed everything, because even though it's very slight, the old cards you had to pay 1 life in addition to the card. And sometimes that matters. I know it's 5% of your life total, but when it's a game of inches, sometimes it really matters. But the magical phrase of "if it's not your turn" is just
brilliant.
It's brilliant. Whoever come up with it, absolutely brilliant. And I love it. Yeah. My number 4 here is, once again, classic, old school, cube card, like skill tester in a really weird way. This is where I would suggest going back and watching. I think it was like a late round of the Grand Prix where Patrick Sullivan is playing Red Deck Wins.
This was at a Star City Games Open against Ross Merriam.
Yes. Oh. So Google that match. It'll be, trust me, you'll find it.
It's insane. It's insane, that moment.
It's one of those things that it literally produced awe out of me watching him play through that moment and getting his opponent, getting Ross to do the exact thing he needed him to do. Get him with FIREBLAST out of nowhere.
I still feel this moment.
Oh God, it's so good. It's so good. 2 red, 4 generic mana for a common instant, y'all. Common. It says you may sacrifice 2 mountains rather than pay the spell's mana cost. It deals 4 damage to any target. Yeah. Just perfect.
This was also my number 5.
Nice. So our 4s and 5 were switched.
Yeah, FIREBLAST is spectacular. I mean, it was highly played in Standard because the top of your curve was like 4 mana. You would play the Wrathy Dragon and, you'd play this and have no lands in play, and then your opponent would still be dead. So the moment that we're talking about, of course, was when Patrick Sullivan had a Price of Progress in hand, but Ross had an untapped Wasteland. And so he needed to figure out a line that would get Ross to tap the mana instead of using the Wasteland on his own land. Mm-hmm. And that happened, and he was able to Price of Progress, Fireblast, Ross, basically out of nowhere for 12 or something ridiculous from a kind of unlosable, what looked like an unlosable board position. Right. It was a spectacular play, a spectacular moment. Fireblast is just amazing.
Yeah.
And yeah,
this is one of those cards, and it's just like the Red Deck wins deck, where it's like, and people are like, "That's deck's so dumb and stupid, and it just plays itself." And it's like, it really don't.
No.
Because when you see people who can really play it, like that Patrick Sullivan play, I mean, it's like poetry. It's crazy.
The margins are so thin when you're trying to play Red Deck wins or Sly, or Zoo even. Like this card saw a lot of play in Zoo in Old Extended as well. And Blue Red Delver for that matter. This is one of the big reasons, one of the big draws to play Delver these days. Blue Red Delver is because you get Fireblast.
There you go. Let's move on here to number 3. Aaron, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is the last hire on my list.
Oops, there it was. That was my bad. Ruben, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is a card that I am not sure I've ever cast. I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone cast. But you read it and you go, oh, that's stupid. Like, I mean, it takes something to make it stupid, but you look at it and you're like, that definitely will eventually get very broken. And it is banned in Modern as a result. Now, it was banned in Modern before it ever really took over, before it ever really won any tournaments. But Sam Black did get 3rd/4th place with Mono Blue Infect at the very first Modern Pro Tour. Thanks in large part to 4 copies of Blazing Shoal. So Blazing Shoal is a part of the Shoal cycle from Betrayers of Kamigawa.
There you go, Evan.
There you go. Blazing Shoal is X red for an arcane instant. Target creature gets +X+O until end of turn. But you may exile a red card with converted mana cost X from your hand rather than pay this spell's mana cost. In the Mono Blue Infect deck, we were usually removing Dragonstorm, but sometimes we were getting rid of Progenitus as well. And this card did have a little bit of a life in Old Extended in a deck called Sneaky Go, which was like the go-to sneak attack deck of the format, where you played 4 Dragon Tyrants, which is hilarious as well. You would like sneak out a Dragon Tyrant, discard a Dragon Tyrant to a Blazing Shoal, and attack with a double striking 2010 or whatever.
Now, back when, back in my day, when Modern first came out, first of all, there was no deck list online. There was no, you had to submit your deck list, a week before, and everybody saw everything you were doing. So everyone's still scratching and scribbling, on their deck list, the morning of. And this was a very well-kept secret. The Mono Blue Infect deck, Sam Black had developed this thing. It was clearly busted. It was doing way too much for way too little. And Blazing Shoal became like a $20 card overnight, and then Wizards banned the piss out of it. And there you go. That's what happened.
And good thing they did.
Yeah, this was my number 7.
Nice.
I was not playing Modern at the time, and so this was one of those cards where, like, when you're getting into a format and you hear about a ban list and you're doing the research and you're like, Blazing Shoal, like, what did this card do?
Funnily enough, this is also my number 7. So
okay,
Aaron and I on the same wavelength.
Now they're playing it in Vintage. People are starting to get really cute with like bizarre decks, and so there was a version of Hogak Vine that was running this and Fury of the Horde, and
why not?
That way you can just turn your Meb Knight or your Hollow One into this really big obnoxious threat. You have Squee Goblin the Bobs, which you're using for card advantage, and so
adorable.
Absolutely adorable.
Yes.
Well, let me tell you, for my number 3 here, we have a card that it came after Alliances, right? Because Alliances, broke a whole lot of ground in a whole bunch of places. And one of the things was alternate casting costs. But Wizards hadn't really learned their lesson yet, right? They didn't really think that much about, well, what if you just paid X instead of Y? And it doesn't really matter how that sort of works. This led up into Urza's Block, and then all hell broke loose. But let's put ourselves back in the heyday of Stronghold, when they decided to make reserve list rares, because I hate those. God, those are the worst. But they didn't really know what they were doing when they decided to make every spell a pitchable, alternate payable spell with Dream Halls.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this completely broke later. But when it was first released, it was like, that's kind of cute and funny and silly. Later bad things happened. Dream Halls is 2 blue, 3 generic mana for a rare enchantment. It says, rather than pay the mana cost for a spell, its controller may discard a card that shares a color with that spell. That is some of the most broken crap I could put into one sentence. on a Magic card.
I remember playing Magic at this point, and I was just casually playing. Like, I think I was playing at like a friend's basement. You know, I was in high school. I didn't have a lot of money, and I just didn't get it. And so to come back to the game at like 30, you know, and then, you know, say, well, what have I missed all these years? And you're like, oh, you know, Dream Halls is completely busted. And it's like, that card? Like, okay.
You get to cast it, y'all. You get all the goodness of casting the stuff, too. All the cast triggers.
If you want an aneurysm, what you should do is go look up a deck called Turbo Zvi.
Oh, my God.
Which was Zvi Mauschewitz's kind of breakthrough onto the scene. Turbo Zvi was a mono-blue combo deck that centered around Dream Halls. That if you look at the deck list, you're like, this deck doesn't have a win condition. Like, I don't understand what's happening. What is, like, I don't know how this deck wins. And it was very complicated, but you could win ultimately by casting Lobotomy over and over and over and over again. That's literally how the deck won.
Wow.
And you could cycle through your entire deck with Gaia's Blessing and just drawing a bunch of cards with Ancestral Memory, and you got rid of all your lands with Mana Severance and all that kind of stuff.
You just discard the card. You don't even exile the card.
Right.
You get to discard the card. And like, and, you know, this is, again, we're talking, you know, this is what, 1999, 1998?
Yep. 99 was Turbo Zvi.
Goodness gracious. It was just
and
like...
Nowadays, what you're doing with Dream Halls is typically pairing it with Show and Tell and Omniscience and Enter the Infinite and doing crazy things in Legacy like that.
Yeah, doing all kinds of stupid busted stuff. And it's $30 because they can't reprint it. Womp womp. All right. Aaron, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is a card that, hot take, I'm convinced just didn't need to exist. You know, Modern Horizons has made its share of mistakes, or has contributed to, you know, some just really grim circumstances, I think. I think formats have been irrevocably changed by these cards. And this card looks harmless enough, but I know that I'm not alone. I know that there's a small faction of people that feel like this card was a mistake, and I'll tell you why. My number 2 is Force of Negation.
Yeah.
So Force of Negation, Modern Horizons, 1 colorless and 2 blue. It's an instant. If it's not your turn, you can exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay the spell's mana cost. And you can counter target non-creature spell. If that spell is countered this way, you exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. So for the longest time, one of the biggest pieces of feedback that people had about Modern was that you didn't have Force of Will. Like, there were people, specifically control players, that were like, you know, I cannot be prepared for everything, where, you know, I can be prepared for like the Tron decks and maybe the graveyard decks, but then I'm missing against like the mid-range decks. And people were like, we really need Force of Will, because they were like, we just don't feel, you know, like we have the means to deal with things and deal with the combo decks. And so, you know, Wizards gives you Force of Negation. The problem is now is that every blue deck, from Legacy and Vintage is now running essentially 8 forces. And so, you know, it does feel a bit unstoppable at times. Having Force, you know, in Modern, you know, does change things, you know, and there are people out there. I think even if you look at Modern now, you know, there are a number of decks putting up results right now. Or when you look at metagame shares, it is just kind of nothing but blue decks right now. And so, you know, it is, you know, it's not on the surface, it's not like ban worthy or anything, but you just have to ask yourself if blue decks really needed 8 forces, where, you know, in Legacy and Vintage, you could run Force of Will and Daze, and you have Mindbreak Trap, or you have, you know, other things like that, but just 8 forces, like it just changes the game, and it just gives blue decks an edge that they don't necessarily, some would say they don't need to have.
I mean, if it's not your turn, right?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
3 mana is easily castable. Like,
also, it's cancel at that point. Yeah, this was my number 8.
This is my number 10. Yep.
I do think that this card, of the forces that they printed in Modern Horizons, when I read this card and I saw all of the tweaks and all of the bells and whistles, and I was like, Modern kind of does need a stopgap. Like, Legacy survives because of Wasteland and Force of Will. Modern needs that. Modern needs something like that. And I looked at Force of Negation and I was like, we're stopping these broken Allosaurus Rider decks. We're able to stop these turn 1, turn 2 combo decks that are glass cannons and making them pay, as opposed to, you know, not actually being able to handle that kind of stuff. I think that I really love the design of Force of Negation. I think it's a beautiful design. It's necessary for Modern. I agree that they may have missed slightly as it goes back to Legacy and Vintage.
Maybe,
but in terms of putting it into, like, you know, like 4-color kind of Delver decks and Stoneblade decks, I think it's just a beautiful design.
It's really, really sweet. This to me again was my number 10. I feel like the idea behind it was sound. I think the design of it is really, really awesome. I also agree that, and we find this all the time, that when you mix the new stuff with all the old busted stuff, it just gets more busted, and you're like, so you don't really want to ban this card because that doesn't make a lot of sense. But you also don't necessarily want them to have 8 different ways to just pitch cards and interact with you the whole game. It's really annoying. But I would love for this to be an historic, for example. If they were to bring this over to Magic Arena, I would absolutely love it. It would stop the weird Neoform decks that are happening, which I absolutely despise, amongst other awesome things that it could do. But yeah, this was one of the hallmarks of the set. If this card was not exciting, Modern Horizons fails. Like, it's just that simple.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Ruben, what's number 2?
My number 2 is a card that I feel like has the most unique relationship with the banned and restricted list of any card that's ever been printed in Magic the Gathering. It has an off-again, off-on-again relationship with the restricted list. I think it's been restricted and unrestricted 4 times, something ridiculous like that. It's banned in Legacy, it's banned in Pauper. And it is another one of these cards that was in, like Land Grant, was in those original Turbo Grow decks or Miracle Grow decks. It also won a Pro Tour in the hands of Mr. Sigurd Eskelund in the Mono Blue Fish deck at Pro Tour New York, Pro Tour Rebels. We stopped the onslaught of Rebels thanks in large part to Gush. Gush is 4 colorless and a blue for an instant from Mercadian Masks. It is a common. You may return 2 islands you control to their owner's hands rather than pay this spell's mana cost. Draw 2 cards. There's never been a better enabler for Library of Alexandria than this card. When you're playing very few lands and don't really ever care to have more than 2 in play at a time, such as with those Super Grow decks, you play your Quirion Dryad and you're able to play your Gush and you're able to, play your land grants and your very small spells. Not to mention reset those lands under your own Winter Orb. That's a big deal as well. This card has been in Merfolk Opposition. It's been in Skies. More recently in Monastery decks and Xerox decks in Vintage. And it's just it's just so good at what it does.
Yeah, this is my number 5. Now you can run it with Mystic Sanctuary.
Great.
Because that's an island.
Geez.
Yes,
it
yes,
is an
it
island.
is. I pointed that out. I'm telling you, that was a mistake. That stupid card is a mistake and will be a mistake forever.
It's true. I remember the first time that I gushed.
Oh my God.
And
this is not the pre-show, Aaron.
Please.
We know. Come on now.
And every time I gush since, it still feels like the first time. It is
for sure.
You just feel like you're doing something completely broken. And how many cards can say that they have books written about them? Stephen Menendian has famously written, one book, but like several editions of like an entire book of like how to maximize gush. And again, you mentioned, Ruben, the skill set that comes with playing burn, or, the lines that come with it, and people assume like, it just casts burn spells. But, same thing with counterspell decks. You can just throw forces at things. You can just, just cast a divination or something. But, there is so much that goes into casting Gush at the right time. And there have been so many streams I've seen where that card alone has led to just discussions of like, I wouldn't have gushed here. Do you want to gush main phase? Are you looking for something?
Right.
When I do it, I still feel like I'm not doing it well. Like there's just so much that goes into this card.
There was a time in Vintage when Gush plus Fast Bond, was the most powerful thing that you could be doing by a wide margin. You would play Fast Bond, you'd Gush, return 2 lands, pay a couple life, play them again, Gush again, and you just go to town through your entire deck.
That's the deck I played at the 2007 Magic Invitational, and completely screwed it up.
And it's been restricted and unrestricted through the years, like in Vintage. Like it's been fine and it's not been fine, and just
it's like a bad relationship. It's like Sid and Nancy.
Steven,
when the gushing's good, no one knows.
Yeah.
Like I got to room a Stephen Menendian who wrote 350 pages worth of Gush and Understanding Gush, and and he was trying to show me how the deck worked and stuff. And I've told this story before where he's like, well, you got the nuts. Let's shuffle up for another game. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do with the nuts. I'm aware that the nuts exist, and I apparently have it.
Can you explain it to me?
Could you explain what the nuts involves? But he didn't. But no, this card is absolutely incredible, and it's free card draw.
Yeah.
Okay, but seriously, the Magic Online promo, what is up with that not being on cardboard yet? Like, have you seen that thing? It's awesome.
I haven't. Let me look.
Check out the Magic Online promo. You can check it out on Scryfall. It is really cool.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, isn't it? Well, let me tell you, while I don't have Gush on my list, I'm happy to get, ragged for that. But I'll also note, Ruben, I cannot believe, unless this is your number 6, that we ain't seeing DAZE on your list, bro.
It's my number 6.
All right, we did it. We got there. Let me tell you, there's few spells like DAZE that are as, I don't know, as impactful, as important. Infuriating, like piss you off good when they double DAZE you. You're just like flipping tables,
is a heck of a card.
Force Spike is amazing. DAZE is also amazing. It is straight from Nemesis, part of the Bush block. It is a common instant. That's a blue and a generic mana. You may return an island you control to its owner's hand rather than pay this spell's mana cost. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 generic mana.
Once again, mono blue
number
fish.
3. This is my number 3. I mean, and just, you haven't lived until you've had like your Black Lotus dazed. I've had a Hogak dazed where I'm just like, excuse me?
Yeah.
Like what? Did you? Are we doing this?
One of my favorite things to do in the history of Magic is I've played a lot of Painter. I play a lot of turn 1 Blood Moons.
Yeah, you have.
My opponent plays a Daze and I exile a Simian Spirit Guide. It's like the best feeling because they're like, gotcha. And I'm like, Uno reverse card. We did it.
Oh my god. Yeah, this is where I spent thousands of dollars making Don't Daze Me Bro sleeves.
Yep.
When I first joined SCG, that was a thing.
Yeah, and it's one of those cards that, like, better. Like, you're playing against a deck that runs Daze, and yet you just either let your guard down or you think they don't have it, and you walk into it. Like, there could be, like, blooper reels of just people walking into Dazes of, like, whoop.
You gotta make them have it. You gotta make them have it.
Turn 1 Delver, turn 1 Nimble Mongoose, those are the kinds of things that you're playing with your Daze primarily.
But this combined, now think of it as you have the forces, you now have 8 forces and Daze. Like, that's obnoxious. Like,
it is incredibly obnoxious, but it is what it is, which means we turn here to our number 1, and I do say our number 1. This was
what
no
else
surprise.
Could it possibly have been?
What else could it be? We know. I mean, there's an elephant in the room. It's a big, beautiful elephant, but it remains the elephant. Our number 1's Force of Will. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, this is, it's pretty ubiquitous at this point. 3 colorless and 2 blue. You can pay 1 life and pitch a blue card to counter a spell. It doesn't have to be on anybody's turn in particular. But this is the safety valve that keeps formats in check. It keeps the decks like Belcher and, all of those crazy combo decks from getting too out of hand. And just thinking about what metagames would be like. This is the card that people in Modern said they needed in order to really enjoy Modern. And, Wizards gave it to them in a sense, but what cost? And, I've certainly used this in Dredge. Dredge doesn't leave home without Force of Will now. And so, just an incredibly powerful card. And I feel like it took a while to get going. Like, I feel like, people really looked at Alliances or those other cards and were like, ew, and like just didn't really, but once it broke, there was just no putting it back in the bottle.
It wasn't really
many years.
played. Yeah. It wasn't really played in, it was played in like combo decks. It was played in like High Tide. And it was played in. I
played it in the Cadaverous Bloom and Standard.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't unplayable. It was just like people got this weird relationship with the pitch cards because we'd never seen them before.
Because it was card disadvantage. Yeah. And, until very recently, you look at Standard and you say this format is dominated by what card advantage can we do, right? Even most blue control decks are like 1-for-1 you. Doomblade your creature. Counter this 1 spell, then play a Divination. That's a 2-for-1. Now I'll play another 1-for-1 removal, another 1-for-1 counter spell, another, play a Gush, 2-for-1, right? Or Factor Fiction, we 3-for-1, and then put more stuff in our graveyard. And it took a long time until we got to a point where we reached a singularity where card quality beat out card advantage, where 2-for-1ing yourself is what you needed to do in order to win the game.
And that 1 life is also relevant. There have been games where somebody's hanging on and it's like they cannot force. Like,
yeah,
I hope you got a negation, Brad.
And that 5 mana, that 5 mana for a cancel. I've
paid 5 mana.
I've paid retail for more Force of Wills than I care to admit. But it's you do what you got to do to get by. But certainly this and Wasteland together are the glue that holds Legacy together as a format, and part of what makes Vintage still playable.
Yeah.
Like without these cards, Combo would run rampant, and no one would be able to do anything about it. You look at like what whenever you're attempting to do anything, be it in a combo deck, be it in a mid-range strategy, a shops deck, any of that kind of stuff, you have to consider the possibility that your opponent has a force of will.
Yeah.
And that's just going to be true from now until forever, until Magic
hard.
2.0. I guess we'll see.
And I mean, they've at this point, at least they've reprinted it a number of times, but to this day, the cheapest version that you're going to find is $75.
Yep, and that's what that's an ace up their sleeve. They always can throw a force of will in the set, and everyone's going to lose their mind and be excited about it. And yada yada yada.
That's just the way it is.
That's right. Some things will never change. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. All right. Well, he's singing, so we're done here.
For the alternative episode.
And that was our top 10 alternate cost cards. You'll see them on screen right now. For your review, take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. This has been tons of fun.
Tons of fun as we move here to our final slide. All right. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, my co-hosts, Aaron Campbell and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching or listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Please follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online on Twitch TV at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.